Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamdulillah. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Radiyallahu ta'ala anhu wa sadada tabi'ina wa ulama amilina wa a'ima arba'i mujtahidin wa muqalidihim ila yawmiddin amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. We're back with our Umdat'l Bayaan class. And we'll be going over finishing the discussion of Wudu. Okay? We'll be finishing the discussion with those things that break Wudu. Last week we had wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last week we had began and we talked about a few things. We talked about hadith, right? And the two types. We talked about hadith al-kabir, his major hadith which requires ghusl. And then we talked about hadith al-saghir. We also mentioned that hadith is what puts you in the state of ritual impurity where it either necessitates wudu or ghusl. And in the case of hadith al-saghir, right, minor hadith, we mentioned that they were 5 things, right? Prostatic fluid, semen, urine, and then feces and also breaking wind, right? We mentioned that in there. Then we talked about what was called the sabab or the asbab, right? Those things that causes you to your wudu to be considered broken, right? And you have to renew your wudu in order to pray, in order for your, whatever the act of ibadah is that you're going to do to make it valid. And we talked about sleep, and we talked about the different rulings of sleep, right? Where the sleep was divided into four divisions. The first one was a long and a heavy sleep. Long sleep is determined in at least about 20 minutes, right? If you sleep for more than 20 minutes, it's considered, or more than 19 minutes, minute number 20 is considered a long sleep. A heavy sleep is determined by if a person calls your name or say something to you and you don't respond and they have to call you a second time, then that's considered a heavy sleep. So a long heavy sleep, it breaks your wudu. A short heavy sleep also breaks your wudu. And of course we define short by anything under 20 minutes. A short light sleep doesn't break your wudu, meaning it's under 20 minutes and the person calls your name and you wake up, right? A long light sleep is recommended for a person to make wudu, right? We also discussed that breaking wudu, cause that for your wudu to break also is by loss of sanity, right? Loss of your intelligence through insanity. So you go temporarily insane, right? You lose your level of sanity temporarily, right? Most cases of insanity, a person loses that. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Or a person loses their sanity is usually just temporarily. But while you're in that state, your wudu is broken. When you come out of that state of insanity, then you renew your wudu. You have to make wudu again before you pick up, the prayer. Which is also displayed by when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about the pen being lifted. And one that it's mentioned is that the pen is lifted for the person who, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, is for the pen is lifted for that person that, they're not functioning with their full mental capacity. That's what I want to say. Their full mental capacity, right? They're not functioning, fully. The fourth thing is intoxication. When a person becomes intoxicated, their wudu is broken, right? Now, of course, unlawful intoxication, but there's also, when you say lawful intoxication, we're not talking about, a person going and get drunk lawfully or anything of that nature, but more so where a person has too much a consumption of a thing where it intoxicates them and alters their mental state. The fifth thing we mentioned was apostasy. When a person apostates, right? A person commits apostasy, and usually your apostasy is either done, you apostate either by a statement or an action, right? A statement or an action. If the person does an action or does a statement of apostasy, then their wudu is broken. When they return back to Islam, then they're there to make a fresh wudu, right? Number 6, we talked about having doubt. All right, if a person having doubt concerning ritual impurity, except when a person has a problem of emission, right? Meaning that, and it takes a different hukum in itself. We're going to explain. I'm not even going to elaborate on it, but a person having doubt, certainty eradicates doubt, but doubt never eradicates certainty. All right. Certainty eradicates doubt, but doubt never eradicates certainty. Right? So when one has doubt about an action that he's not certain about, then, with the wudu, he would fulfill the wudu. Number 7 is for the male is touching the penis with the inner part of your palm or your fingers, even if it's one finger when it's touched, right? So if a person had on a glove, and they touched their penis for whatever reason, hypothetically speaking, or some kind of barrier between the palm of their hand, then that's not broken wudu, right? But however, anytime the palm is touched, uncovered, raw palm, then that breaks the wudu, right? And we'll also talk about, the actual, where it does apply to a woman, but her case is just a tidbit different. Point number 8, and this is where we left off at. Point number 8 is touching a woman, right? But however, what we know is touching a woman, it has categories. It's categorized. In some madhahibs, madhabs, you'll find with the school of Ahl Medina, we're in the middle, we're balanced, right? We're not too lax, and we're not too stringent. Too lax, men to just touch any woman they want. Not unrestrictedly, but, just touch and they feel that there's nothing. This is one of the positions of the madhabs of Ahl Sunnah. The other side is that every woman you touch, it breaks wudu. Even you're just doing a business transaction, you hand her money, and it touches, your hand touches her hand, wudu is broken. The problem that you have with that is it becomes problematic is because when you go on Hajj, when you're on Hajj, it's hard to separate the two genders, right? And when there's a big crowd and a lot of people there, you're going to brush and touch, right? So therefore, the one that has the very stringent, if you touch a woman is over type thing, they always have to borrow a position. Walaikum salam. They always have to take a position outside of their particular school, right? So they find a difficulty. However, with us, we have it in 4 categories where you basically combine the two. The first part is if he intends pleasure and he experiences pleasure, then he has to make wudu, right? If he intends pleasure and he experiences the pleasure, he has to make wudu, right? The second category is that if he experiences pleasure, but he didn't intend to receive pleasure, he has to make wudu. If he intends pleasure and does not experience the pleasure, he has to make wudu, And if he did not intend pleasure and he didn't experience pleasure, then he doesn't have to make wudu. Okay? So basically the thing which violates your wudu is if a person intends to receive pleasure, right? He intended to receive the pleasure, but he didn't experience the pleasure. Or if he intends it and he intends the pleasure and he receives the pleasure, right? Or if he intends it but he didn't receive it. Or if he didn't intend it but he received pleasure, it all breaks wudu. Right? So this is the balance. This is the balance that one has to keep for the purposes of wudu. Right? And a woman, this means, whether she's a non-mahram woman, right? Of course, touching your mother doesn't break your wudu. We're talking about a non-mahram woman here, right? And the same thing applies for the women as well. As the touching, because a person that's non-mahram, you're not supposed to touch him anyway, right? A non-mahram individual is not supposed to be touched. However, and when you're saying non-mahram, meaning it's a person that's eligible for marriage, right? You're not supposed to touch them anyway, right? So this breaks wudu. Also, the shehu, he talks about it in another text. He says that kissing your wife, of course, generally breaks wudu. Okay? It generally breaks wudu. Number 9, wudu is also broken by incontinence and urine for a short time, right? If you have a problem with incontinence, but it's not for a long time, where a person has the dribble of urine, okay? Now this hukum also extends to a woman that has what they call menorrhea, right? Where she has an ongoing flow of blood from her, from her genital, of course. It's a false mense, basically. If she has this, then after every salat, she would have to, just like the male, if he has incontinence, or female, if they have urinary incontinence, they would have to make wudu before every salat. They would make wudu before every salat. This is how they will fix and solve this particular issue. You make wudu after every salat. There's no one wudu to the next wudu for them. Especially if you have menorrhea, you're constantly flowing of blood, or a person that has incontinence with urine, right? Constant dribble of urine, always dribbling. They make wudu for every salat. You can't emphasize that enough. He said that wudu is not broken by the emission of Walaikum Assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wudu is not broken by the emission of stones and worms, right? Even if they're moist, it's not broken by that, right? A person is urinating kidney stones, that's what we call them, kidney stones, and worms. When people have parasites in their stomach, even if they are moist, touching the anus, the female or the male testicles does not break wudu, right? So if a person is touching their behind, or the man touches the testicles, and the female testicles, gonads, of course, is their breast, it doesn't break wudu. Right? He says, nor does a woman touching her private parts breaks her wudu, meaning just a touch. But however, if she fondles herself or she inserts her hand within her labia, then she has to make wudu. Okay? If she fondles herself or she inserts her hand, then she has to make, wudu. Okay? So we've completed everything thus far with regards to wudu, with regards to water. We talked about purity. things that are considered pure, things that are considered impure. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We talked about the various types of waters. We talked about hadith, ritual impurity, whether major and minor. We discussed that. We discussed all of those things, right? We even discussed some of the proofs connected to and associated with wudu. If you are on Facebook, because the streaming is recorded, it uploads to our Tajdiya Sunnah YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to that, we're asking that you do. We want to bring up our list, our subscriber list, increase our subscriber membership, inshallah, so that we can start running live on that as well. You have to get 1,000 subscribers, before you start running live. Inshallah, we want to do that as well, so, circulate, spread the information, invite others to follow and, participate. So all of these things, they're all in this. If you go back, memorize all of the content that we covered with regards to wudu, water, all of that, then a person is a trustworthy source. Now, the thing is that you have to do, and the nafs gets involved, especially when it comes to teaching, right? You have to stop where your knowledge stops at. You have to stop where your knowledge stops at, right? You cannot be dishonest. Dishonest is going beyond your limits, right? Nothing, and you have beautiful examples from the Salaf, and, especially the story of Imam Malik, radiallahu ta'ala, where the men came and they asked him, I think it was a series of like 40, 44, 49 questions or something like that, and I think Malik only answered about 5 of them, and they said, well, you're supposed to be the great Imam Malik. What do I tell people when I go back home? He said, you tell them that Imam Malik said he didn't know, So, you stop where your knowledge stops at, right? And because knowledge is an amana. And this is why it's punished severely, in the fire, with a person, when a person, it goes beyond his scope and his practice of knowledge, right? When a person goes past that, then therefore the person, what happens is that Allah Ta'ala punishes them severely, right? Knowledge, you just can't be shooting from the hip. Usually what you see a lot of people, I think the page is public. This page is public, Malik. What you experience with a lot of people is that sometimes people just talk like they almost do like an Aristotle type of Islam. I wonder, I ponder, if this happens and then that happens, and of course it makes sense to me, so therefore this must be, no, this doesn't make sense to me, so therefore this hadith must be weak. No, it isn't. This isn't the case. You have to understand that. All right, inshallah, I'll adjust the settings, inshallah. These are the behaviors that people display, especially when it comes to marriage. When it comes to marriage, people just shoot from the hip, it's not valid to do this and it's not valid for that. And it's, you'd be like, where are these people getting this from? And yeah, she has to have his, he has to have her permission for this, and he has to do this. And then, the marriage is invalid if he does this. And people are like destroying people's families, and, knowledge is in a manner. So imagine when you spread the wrong information, when you tell a person, some misinformation, you tell a person that there is permissible for them to do a thing when it's not permissible, right? Or you tell a person that is invalid for a thing, or, the marriage is nullified, or, and so on and so forth, or, you telling a person they committed kufr because of this, or, they committed kufr because of that. And if this doesn't have its source, because the reality is, and the truth of the matter is, Islam, it checks your nafs, and a lot of people are in denial about their nafs, right? Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, which is the demanding self, that craving, the nafs is part of you, and it demands of you things, you know what I mean? most people they acknowledge Shaitan, and some of this is by Christian theology influence. You know, we think that the Shaitan, he controls evil, and you know, God in that concept controls good, you know. And then some people even say, you know, if you look at God, you took an O out, you know, but you put the O in, it's good, and you got the devil, if you take the D out, pause, you know, and you got evil, right? You have all these different sayings and things like that people are, you know, saying. As Muslims, we don't have that type of philosophy. This is why learning Aqidah is extremely important, right? And usually you start off with your belief before you even get into the subject of fiqh. One of the traits of the Maliki scholars with their text was that it was centered around Iman, Islam, and Ihsan. Not saying that anyone else wasn't. Well, what I'm saying is that most books that you have in the past were written exclusively on one subject. Most of the Maliki fuqaha, when they wrote their book, it was an all-inclusive thing, right? They have a whole section on Iman. They're, you know, in dealing with the whole belief, right? And you have a section on fiqh, you know, dealing with all of the mu'amilat. You have a section on tasawwuf, you know, dealing with all of those matters pertaining to the heart. So all of these things, these are things that you're learning and you're responsible for. This is what you're going to give dawah with. This is what you're going to call people to the deen, right? Whether Muslim or non-Muslim, right? You're going to call us to the deen. After they embrace Shahada, they still have to learn how to pray, right? They're going to have to know Tahara, right? They're going to have to know purification. They got to learn all of these things. So it don't just stop at after you give them dawah. And that's usually what we do. You know, we like our goal orientation is very, very narrow. You know, like, yeah, they got Shahada. Yes, alhamdulillah, that's it. You know, and that's it. And then the party's over, right? No, it's not over. You have to teach them how to pray, right? And nothing is better than learning to pray from someone who learned how to pray, who learned from someone else who learned how to pray, who learns from someone else to pray, all the way back to, you know, to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So this is how this happens. You know, the day of I'm just going to slide you a book, that day is over. You can give them the book and make reference to that book. They're learning, you know, where they can also read, but you have to make a combination of both. You have to make a combination of the book learning and also having a teacher, right? You have to make a combination of both, because this is the only way you're going to, you know, it has to be a trust, right? During the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people would come to Medina, learn. They even used to come to Mecca when he was in Mecca, right? That's how Abu Dharr Ghifari ended up becoming Muslim. He came to Mecca to come learn from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was the beginning of him and Ali ibn Abi Talib's relationship. They were real close like this. So, you know, people would come and they would come and learn, and they would take it back to their people. So the same way, you know, you got the source, you learn, and you take it back to your family, and then your family, y'all take it to your friends, and so on and so forth, and you'll continue the spread of Islam. But if we constantly keep just learning, and most people that go and learn, and this is why you have a lot of inactive people that are learning in Islam, because they're leaving the United States to go and learn Islam for themselves. They never had no intention of coming back to study, and so therefore the knowledge stops with them, right? They'll see chaos going on in the community, and which this also make you eligible for the hellfire. They'll see chaos going on, and instead of correcting the chaos and stepping up, they remain silent and watch the people destroy themselves and destroy the deen, right? So this knowledge isn't a manner, right? This knowledge is a trust, okay? So therefore, we mention all of this. You all are learning. You all should know if you memorize the proofs, you know. Let me ask you this, because I only have one online source streaming right now, but I don't care if you watch it later. Just, you know, come in. Would you all prefer me to, every time we finish a section, would you all prefer me to give you like a small test? The kind of like, it's more so for me. It's not for me. It's just kind of like for me when I'm looking at it. It's more so saying like, okay, I've conveyed, you know, my message. But for you, it lets you know where your strengths and weaknesses are, right? You don't have to have a test. I don't have to give this, right? But if you prefer, a test, was it 9 people online right now? If you prefer a test after each, completion of each subject, then maybe hit a thumbs up or something, let me know. Or you could type it in the chat box, and if you're watching it later after the live stream is over, you can still comment in the chat box, like, yeah, maybe we should do this, Then I'll come up with a method of how, I'll send you out a test, and you send it back, inshallah, and I'll let you know, you'll know, I'll mark it off, or maybe the following class or something like that, the following class, maybe I can take and, we can go over the answers or something like that. But I like this idea because it's going to require you to go back and review all of the information that we've covered this far, right? In order to get prepared for it. Now, I know people have like lives, and their lives may be busy, etc., etc. But however, just as a student, you have to make some time to do some studying. Allah made things extremely convenient, for us, because we can always pop in our earbuds and keep it moving. You want to listen to the new Drake album. Maybe you need to cut that in half. When Drake, the average album is about 30 minutes to me, like an hour and a half. So you cut that, right? You cut that, and maybe like listen to your Drake maybe like 15 minutes, and then spend the remainder of the time, preparing for your lessons, for your class, for your classes and etc. So, we start minimizing, managing the time, inshallah. That's really would really work, for your studies. The more you minimize a little of your entertainment, the more you'll be strengthened in certain areas. So if we want to do that, then inshallah, then what we'll do is I'll prepare something, maybe post it, or, they let you make like little polls and stuff like that in the Facebook groups. But, this class, I actually run it on Facebook, and also on Zoom as well, and then it's also on YouTube, and you got Telegram groups where people who are silent participators and so on and so forth. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Absolutely, I do feel that the Maliki school, or Amal Ahlu Medina, is the most practical and adaptive madhab. I do believe that. Everywhere it's gone, it has a track record of where it's went. It's always established the deen, right? And even in the concept of how the scholars, they transmitted the madhab of Malik, it's always been transmitted in that way, like I said, as Iman, Islam, and Ihsan, right? Like when you have a book like Umdat'l Bayaan, and I watched it yesterday when I was at the gathering yesterday. Brother was purchasing a copy of Umdat'l Bayaan, and every time you talk about the book, the brother, he was looking for a book on Tasawwuf, and so he's like, oh, it's right here, Umdat'l Bayaan. He's like, you got a book with Aqidah, it's right here, Umdat'l Bayaan. Yeah, what about fiqh? It's Maliki fiqh, it's right here, Umdat'l Bayaan. So it's all in one. It's not like a dedicated subject, to one subject, So it's all three, and it begins, and the style of study, right? Now it's so practical to the point that when you learn, you learn this, you can just transmit it. You can just go out and transmit it. Because the thing is that we're more concerned with the fahim, the people understanding and transmitting it properly, versus being able to because the two things, ijazah is just like an acknowledgement of you completed a study. The sanad is affirming that you learned with someone else. But however, if a person is not truthful, it will not give you the understanding, the understanding, A person can have all the sanad in the world, right? The first sanad and ijazah I ever received was in the Shamal Imam Tirmidhi. It was like a 4-day intensive with Sheikh Muhammad al-Yaqubi, and basically he gave everybody a general ijazah amiyah, right? But however, he put stipulations on it that you cannot transmit the text if you didn't know Arabic language. That was the condition to it. So the same thing. You think about it. If a person, they can sit and they can learn all of these particular books, because really, it's a lot of you do what they call a maqara, a recitation, where you're reading into the sheikh is correcting you when you're making grammatical mistakes. So if there's grammatical mistakes in the book, because plenty of books have mistakes in it. It's not the Quran, so it's going to have errors in it, right? So I have a grammatical mistake, or maybe something in there where it needs explanation, and so on and so forth, right? And so if you don't have that understanding to be able to explain it, the only thing you can do is narrate that particular text, right? But however, with this particular text and other texts, I'm not saying that our text is superior. We're talking in context here. We would narrate. We're going to narrate what we know, right? We're not going to narrate what we don't know, right? And I remember one of my teachers, because I used to be very zealous, and we'll go over one subject, and he'll be like, listen, teach this. You have idhn to teach this. Don't worry about that over there. We'll get to that. Don't worry about that. You teach what's right in front of you. Make sure you teach this to your family. Then, and then teach this to the closest to you, and then spread it, right? Most of the time with us, we learn the first thing we want to do is go spread it to the entire ummah, and then neglect our family. Our family are not even a reflection of what we claim to be following, right? So this is very important. It's very practical, because that was the way of the Sahabas, right? Maliki, there's a lot of history when which we intend to get into that. There's a lot of history that where you'll find, in Medina, Imam Malik would knock on the door. Hey, listen, what was a mud during the time of the Prophet ﷺ? What did you come with? Oh, this was it. Well, where did you learn that from? I learned that from my grandfather. And where did he learn that from? He learned that from such and such, who learned that from the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, right? Very practical, Another fun fact about Maliki fiqh, we're one of the, if not the only, madhab with what they call, you have what is divided into two things, right? I mentioned maqara. There's two categories. It's riwayah and then diraya, right? Diraya, right? You have riwayah, meaning narrated, and then diraya, where it's derived from, where you get into explanation, right? Now, the Mudawwana of Malik, right? You see a similarity to the Muwatta Imam Malik. The Mudawwana is a separate book of collected fatwas of Imam Malik on subjects, right? Versus the Muwatta is the collection of hadith, narrations of the Salaf, and very few statements of Malik himself, right? But one thing that you'll recognize about the Muwatta, it'll always start off, an Malik, or hadathana Malik, or, however the narrator is mentioning this, from Malik, from, Nafi, from Ibn Umar, from Rasulullah sallallahu, right? But the Mudawwana, it'll be from Ibn Qasim, and he'll say Malik said such. So it's like a chain, It's a chain of verification of the statements, right? Many of the other books are what they call a mukhtasarat, like a summary of the Mudawwana and the Muwatta, right? It's a summary. So it doesn't mention all the chain all the way through. Usually you get the chain in the madhab, where it will narrate the chain from, that scholar that connects you all the way through back to Imam Malik. So yeah, it's very adaptive and practical, if we don't overthink it, inshallah. Any other comments or questions before we close out? So I'm assuming that people are on board with, a lightweight quiz for when we finish, subjects. All right, because when we come back on the next class, we'll be going over ghusl. Okay, we'll be going over ghusl, inshallah. So I guess we'll end. I don't see any comments in the chat. Nothing's coming up. So inshallah, if you think of something later, you can throw it in the chat, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت واستغفرك واتوب اليك. بارك الله فيكم. May Allah Ta'ala bless all of you all, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.